So I'll address the title right away here. When I say learn without trying or learn accidentally, I don't mean this is some kind of learning hack where you're going to be able to learn without any effort or any kind of work put in. We're not going to be like Neo in the Matrix where you just get to put something in the back of your neck and now you know Kung Fu. What I do mean when I say learn without trying, I mean learning in a enjoyable way that feels like discovery, not like homework. And obviously, since this series is called Reasons to Read, we're going to be talking about how to do that through reading. If you're thinking in a very black and white way about your reading and your learning, then your thought process will probably look a little bit like this. I have a problem or a question. I need to find a book that answers that problem or question. And then once I'm done reading it, I will know the answer to that problem or question. And this, of course, is partly true, but it also makes me maybe question, and I'm sure has made you question, why would I go to all the effort of reading that book if I can just look up the specific question I have, right? If you want to know how far away the sun is, that's something you ask Siri. It seems like a waste to me to buy an entire encyclopedia set just for those facts. But I've been discovering that this black and white method of problem book solution is not really analogous to how I actually live my life and how my reading actually impacts my life. So I want to tell you guys about it. When you read a book, a well-written book, you're going to quote unquote accidentally learn a lot of things you didn't plan to learn because you didn't know they were in the book. It could be any number of things, from something concrete like a fact about the world or a new vocabulary word, or it could be something more abstract, like some comparison that the author makes that all of a sudden applies to a specific area of your life that you weren't even looking for help in. So rather than abstract this any further, I'm going to give a couple of examples of things I learned accidentally while reading Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I did make a video that drew heavily from this book earlier this year, so if you're curious what Thoreau could teach us about ChatGPT and AI and the pleasures of learning, feel free to go watch that one. But for now, I'm going to be talking about some other things that I learned by mistake. So if you're not familiar, it's a nonfiction book on simple living. It's based on the author's time spent living in a small house, a shack really, by the edge of Walden Pond in Massachusetts. And so what I meant to learn reading this book was some thoughts on simple living. That was a plan I had, right? I thought I was going to open this book and I'm going to learn about being frugal and about living a quiet life, which I did get that out of this book. But here's some things I didn't mean to get out of this book that I did get. So I did learn some fun facts about the different ponds in the area and the different animals and wildlife. If that's something that's of interest to you, cool. It was a passing interest to me. Like I had a good time reading it. It's not like changed my life in any crazy way, but I learned some stuff about squirrels, which is, cool. There were some really helpful just phrases that I really liked. At one point, he's talking about reading philosophy in the morning, and he says, "In the morning, I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita." Number one, I just really like the phrase, "I bathe my intellect." If you saw my earlier video on not having to quote unquote get something, although it is nice to get it, you don't have to always get it for it to have an impact on you. That phrase, bathe my intellect, was very helpful for me to think, wow, like I can just let something wash over me and absorb what I can. Now, I don't know if Thoreau was trying to say that, but I do like his phrase, and I did like that. And that leads us to the next thing I learned from this book, and the next thing I think you could accidentally learn from other books, which is book references, right? That's always a question, what should I read next? And you can Google what should I read next, and there's some very helpful answers. But when you read, I think you'll be shocked at how often authors reference other books. I mean, I guess this doesn't really happen so much in fiction, but in nonfiction, authors just reference books that have shaped them. And if you like that author and you like how they're talking, how awesome is it that you can get a book recommendation right from them in that moment? So in this case, Thoreau is saying he bathed his intellect in the Bhagavad Gita. And so I thought I will at least give this a shot because Henry David Thoreau recommended it. And if I want to feel like he felt, I have a chance at doing that. So I accidentally got a book recommendation out of it. So the things we've talked about learning accidentally so far are facts about like the pond and how deep it is, phrases like something washing over you that I learned from this book. That's just such a fun image for me. Or book references. You could learn book references like the Bhagavad Gita. But then the final one that I think is probably the most important for me is when you have just a passage in a book that changes your perspective on life. And this is the most important because it's not something you can look up. You can't Google life-changing advice. I mean, I guess you can, but that feels kind of sterile, doesn't it? It doesn't really feel like it's going to jump out at you. It just seems kind of bland. So to find these, you kind of have to be just reading and happen across them, and that's part of the experience. So I'm going to read the passage that really impacted my life probably the most in this whole book, and it was by accident that I found it. So for context, my copy of this book is 358 pages long, and this quote begins on page 343. I'm not much for math, but we are pretty far into this book. And he's been describing his life in the woods for all of these pages. And at the very end of page 343, he says, "Thus was my first year's life in the woods completed, and the second year was similar to it. I finally left Walden September 6th, 1847. And hold on a second, because that's not the whole quote. I'm just going to pause there. That's not the life-changing phrase. But I remember I was reading it and I was like, there's 358 pages in this book, and you spent the first 343 describing the first year. And then you spend a whole second year there, and all you dedicate to that second year is one sentence, which says, the second year was similar to it. I was like, wow, that's so, okay, I guess we're not getting into details in the second year. And then I started wondering maybe why he left, and he describes that in the next chapter. And this is the part that really changed my life. He says, I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live, and could not spare any more time for that one. It is remarkable how easily and insensibly we fall into a particular route and make a beaten track for ourselves. I had not lived there a week before my feet wore a path from my door to the pond side, and though it is 5 or 6 years since I trod it, it is still quite distinct. It is true, I fear, that others may have fallen into it and so helped to keep it open. The surface of the earth is soft and impressible by the feet of men, and so with the paths which the mind travels. How worn and dusty, then, must be the highways of the world, how deep the ruts of tradition and conformity. I did not wish to take a cabin passage, but rather to go before the mast and on the deck of the world, for there I could best see the moonlight amid the mountains. I do not wish to go below now. The whole paragraph is beautiful, but I love that first part where he says, I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. What that passage did for me is just give me peace about when and if my life situation changes. I'm very happy where I am right now. I'm a teacher. I live near some family, but far from other family, near some friends, but far from other friends. I really do like what I'm doing. And sometimes I feel like I might never change that because I'm nervous of losing a good thing. And this passage to me helped me think, well, maybe I do have many more lives to live, and maybe I can't spare any more time for this one. And if you're listening to this and you know me, don't worry, I'm not like, this is not an announcement, I'm not moving, I'm not retiring or running away to Alaska. But just reading this book and getting a sense of, wow, it is possible to be so completely invested and present in a moment like Thoreau is at the pond. The whole book, all you get is the sense of this man is present in the moment and he's just vibing and he's there. It's possible to have that presence of mind and dedication and then to leave. And that you can be a valuable part of a community or society or time and place and then leave because it's time. It felt to me like Frodo at the end of Lord of the Rings. It felt like Peter and Susan at the end of Prince Caspian not being allowed to come back. It felt like Andy at the end of Toy Story 3. Like, it just gave me peace about transitions in my life. And I'm glad I have that peace in my back pocket for when the transitions do come. And I almost wanted to end the video there because that felt like a good ending point, but the next paragraph of this book is just so good. It's a slightly separate point. I'm just going to read it and make of it what you will. This is directly following the quote I read earlier. He says, I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, or the old laws be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. In proportion as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty, poverty, nor weakness, weakness. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Well, if you clicked on this video, I hope you learned some things by accident, and I'd encourage you to pick up a book that's marginally related to something you're interested in. Maybe find something that's been recommended to you by a friend you trust, or in the classics section, or just something with a fun cover that's really okay. And turn off your phone, light a candle, and sit on the couch. And I'm so positive that if you do like that, you'll learn so many more things than you ever meant to, or ever thought you could, and it will feel like discovery instead of homework. And if you do that, I'd love if you came back and left a comment and let me know what you read and what you accidentally learned so the rest of us can learn with you. I'll see you next time.